I don't like that today. If you've ever prepared food for a child, you've probably heard those words. So many of us fight to make sure our children are getting enough nutrition, and then we finally break through and find the one thing that they consistently like that is at least partially healthy. And then one morning, you serve up the usual applesauce and they push it away as if they haven't insisted on eating only that breakfast for the past few weeks. You thought you had mastered and ordered your child. They were manageable, and the fight had subsided. Now they ramp us up again, and so many of us attempt to rely on our logic and reasoning. Those don't matter to a child. Relationship matters to a child. And in their own frustrating way, they're giving us a chance to rehearse something, a surrender to strengthen our interior life and a relationship with our children. Hello, my name is Jacob Pannell, and this is Faithful Fatherhood. Now, in my experience, Mansion 3 is the deepest level of the soul that most people consistently achieve. Many will find themselves in Mansion 4 momentarily, only to lapse back into Mansion 3 without bothering to go deeper. So, when I was reading about Mansion 3, it slapped me in the face. And it will probably hit you too, because I have certainly met 80-year-olds who have spent their lives in church who never make it to the halfway point of Mansion 4. So, how does St. Teresa mark it? Well, she offers us a scathingly simple quote to define those in Mansion 3, that they must have gained the mastery over this world, or at least be extremely detached from it. Yet, if His Majesty sends very moderate trials, they become so disturbed and disheartened as not only to astonish, but to make me anxious about them. So, let's catch back up here. Mansion 1 was moving past our reptilian responses, is that outermost layer, and we map that with some helpful language onto our brainstem. Mansion 2 is kind of mapped onto the cortex, or what we kind of commonly think of as the brain. And that's where our reasoning and rationality comes on. Mansion 3 is the adept usage of both to gain mastery. But the shortfall, as we found in St. Teresa's quote, is a lack of complete surrender. So let me give you some examples here. If you're a church-going person, just picture the generous donor that has suddenly become destabilized when he experiences a financial setback. And that forces him to pull back and hold on to tighter what he already has. Or maybe it's the faithful woman who is devastated after decades of service when her role is given to a younger leader. These aren't people of poor character, but a deep investment has been made into a well-ordered life, and that makes disruption feel like an indictment of God's faithfulness. If you want to look for the same energy in a different organization, picture in your mind the person who invested and built the culture at your company, but their identity is fused with their competence. When the thing they built slips, the response is disproportionate. The portfolio they're managing isn't just professional, it's existential. Now, all three of these kind of examples, the people are valuable because of their mastery in relationships or their knowledge base, but their inability to move forward, even when they can see the next step, is a hallmark of the early to middle part of Mansion 3. To understand why this all fits together, I want to borrow a framework from a business, not because these souls are chasing worldly success, but because the same life cycle that kills organization also traps the devout. So, if you're not familiar, Les McKeown is the author of the aptly titled book, Predictable Success. In the book, he maps the life cycle of a business, which he later discovered often applies to actually most organizations.
Here's an example of a chart. If you look along the bottom, the x-axis, that's for time. The y-axis is for success. That little bit there, that's called trouble, which then leads into fun or rapid success. The fun part goes into whitewater. Whitewater is where your business goes from fun to scalable. And so when you implement the tools that make your business scalable to your market, you get into what Les McKeown describes as predictable success. As you travel through predictable success, there comes a moment called the treadmill. Now, in between there is peace, and actually, lasting companies will stir the pot as they reach the treadmill stage to find new ideas. So they can go back across into a new whitewater moment. However, if no new ideas come out during the treadmill phase, you enter into the big rut. It's kind of like fighting to keep the same processes that you fell in love with during the fun and maybe whitewater stage because they were just part of your identity. Picture the guy who can't let go of something that we just talked about, and they just keep doing the same things. Now, Les McKeown actually notes that if you reach the big rut, you're actually doomed to die. The next stage is called the death rattle. The death rattle, I like to map onto what physicians call the surge, or this kind of last gasp energy that kind of fuels us into thinking a company or a person. In this case, for the vis- in the case in this case for physicians, might come back to life, but it's already too late. They've already been too late since they hit the big rut, and the organization, as it's known, will die. Now, pharmaceutical companies are particularly adept at the treadmill transition because they pump money into new ideas and research to find the next scalable whitewater moment. They're kind of the perfect case example of how this whole process works. If the no new ideas come, though, they re enter into that big rut.
As McEwen actually says that some organizations are completely die and then are bought and then reborn again, even under the same name as they had before, but it's actually a whole new organization. So this chart that I'm giving you is not complete, but it does help simplify things into a simple system. Now, what McEwen is describing is businesses, but St. Teresa is describing something just as structured, a spiritual life. The third mansion dweller hasn't scaled a company, they've scaled devotion. Their fun phase was early conversion, on fire faith, the honeymoon. Their whitewater was learning discipline, building habits of prayer, burning away obvious sin. Now maybe they're on the treadmill, consistent, respected, orderly. They're hitting church every Sunday. They're doing maybe regular confessions. They have volunteer commitments. Nothing's falling apart, but nothing is going deeper. So the people in Mansion 3 are fighting to maintain success and grasp after accomplishments. And they often treat their whole life like a business. The problem with that is you're not a business. You're a person. The person living in Mansion 3 has mastered the world and tried to apply that to God. They've built a spiritual portfolio and expect returns. Now, reaching mastery finds that it lacks meaning and is turning backwards. Let me help you kind of begin to capture the feeling of what mansion is. It's like reaching mastery, actually succeeding in doing what you wanted, but finding that it lacks meaning. When that happens, sometimes we retreat to mansion two. We try and learn a new skill. We try and create a new thing, and we go up across the predictable success line. Or maybe you even turn to mansion one, those reptilian responses. I think we can picture those people that have been successful and think about how they fall into someone who goes and learns more or falls to the reptilian responses. At the end of the day, They're too busy managing the spiritual portfolio to rest in God. If it feels like the path through the soul is achieving more, that's exactly where St. Teresa redirects us into humility as the path forward. So let's talk a little bit. I'm going to give you some concrete examples about why the Mansion 3 dweller kind of stalls out. The first one from St. Teresa is accumulation. Greed halts us. Our desire to keep acquiring equates to us never surrendering. Performance. Sometimes we end up seeking glory instead of valor, and we're avoiding our interior lives, gilding our exterior ones. Sometimes we are exposed for our fragility, and loss halts us. That moderate trial produces disproportionate collapse. Sometimes we're delegating out our spiritual life. We farm it out to our pastors, outsourcing our interior journey that only we can take. Sometimes, and this is the one that I really have seen a lot in those who don't fall in any of the other categories, it's just dry. There's spiritual dryness, and we mistake that spiritual dryness for abandonment and not an invitation to spread out. And the last one, which gets me, is comfort. We don't always want to pay the cost of going deeper. Now, if you haven't seen it yet, a lot of these feelings actually equate or arrive in what we call a midlife crisis. Fortunately, we can read the thoughts of someone who appears to have gone through the ultimate midlife crisis, King Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, most people read that book as an end of life journal or monologue, but I think it's far more interesting to read as King Solomon taking up his own counsel during a midlife crisis. Consider this quote from Ecclesiastes 2. This is King Solomon writing this. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks. And I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. And in all this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet, when I surveyed what my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. Let me just say that last bit again for you right there. Yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. King Solomon mastered the world, and his conclusion was nothing was gained. I think sometimes we can feel the same way during our midlife crises. We've mastered something, but what's the point? The trap of Mansion 3 is thinking that's the end, but it's not even halfway. There are 7 levels to go in all told, and we're only in level 3. The trap of Mansion 3 is that comfort or that success or that predictability and not going further. Now, throughout this series, I have been reading into AI and the algorithms that are shaping our perception of reality. The algorithm is great at getting us to predictable success, and then it keeps us there. Consider Asa Raskin, who actually invented the infinite scroll. You know it as perhaps the reason that our thumbs just keep on going on the phone. He later regretted it, estimating that it cost humanity 200,000 lifetimes of attention every day. That's 200,000 lifetimes of attention every day. He built the perfect synthetic treadmill. The algorithm is great at getting us between treadmill and white water and then keeping us there. Or consider this, the Red Queen effect. If you're not familiar with it, it's an evolutionary biology term that actually was adopted from Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, The Red Queen. The Red Queen has this quote when describing Wonderland: "You have to run as fast as you can just to stay in the same place." Now, let's combine those two into the algorithm. A new version drops and the cycle resets, and you just run the loop faster. You do higher output, more engagement, but you're actually in the same position. Lewis Carroll figured this out before there was even ever a computer. And we can find ourselves in the same spiritual position. The algorithm is an extraordinarily efficient machine for keeping you in Mansion 3 and calling it growth. Similarly, we can get stuck working on spiritual production. We want God to operate on our terms and reward our careful management. But St. Teresa warns that relying on our own reason makes us just creep on our way to God. When we focus only on managing our progress, we actually miss true abandonment. Now, if you want to move through Mansion 3, which I'm hoping that this has given you enough of a taste for that, the question that becomes exceedingly important is, what is your faith? For St. Teresa in the Christian faith, the prescription is simple and expensive for those of us who have reached this point. Stop expecting God to honor your careful management. Stop demanding spiritual sweetness. Leave your reason, which is what we just gained in one mansion ago, or fears in his hands. View yourself as an unprofitable servant. Now, that's not a checklist. That's a posture. It's a posture, maybe an open hand. Contrast that with something that I think a lot of people or a lot of men in my life have for their faith in, something like hard work, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. If your faith is in hard work, you're just going to keep riding the algorithmic cycle. You're never going to get to Mansion 4. You're never going to live there. You're just going to stay in Mansion 3 for the rest of your life, just over and over and over again, trying to run as fast as you can, capture as much as you can, hold on to and grasp as much as you can. The posture that St. Teresa is urging us toward, and that I wrote about last week, is that of an open hand. You've ordered and mastered so much, so you have a lot to let go of. But the open hand isn't just letting go, it's to receive. Letting go to move closer to the center of your soul. Faith draws you to the center. St. Teresa says it this way: "And if we truly detach ourselves from all things, our Lord will not only grant us these favors, but many others that we do not even know how to desire." So it's not a letting go just to let go. It's a letting go so you can receive, so you can move into the next mansion. Now, let's all tie this into fatherhood here, because we have a whole bunch of stuff going on here. Now, let's start with McKeown's business picture. Predictable success with kids is desired because it's just easier. But every time I figure out a version of my kid, that kid is gone 6 months later. A new one shows up with different needs. And that kind of makes mastery feel useless. We have to keep going back to whitewater or adapt, or we end up hitting the big rut with our kid. Fatherhood gives us a daily rehearsal for that open hand posture. Picture this. There's a father out there who manages his teenager like an 8-year-old. That father is behaving like a third mansion dweller. They're fighting to keep an old version alive so that he can feel competent. And I will blame him because when you feel competent, a lot of times you feel confident, and sometimes that equates to success. But success doesn't necessarily relate to a relationship. So, St. Teresa's advice is to practice detachment from your competence with your child, just as you would do with God. The relationship of you with your child, if you let it, trains you for the mansion, trains you for the next level of the mansion. But there's a little bit of a warning here too. She calls us out on it. That's us, the dads. Their love is not strong enough to overcome their reason. I wish it were, that they might not content to creep on their way to God, a pace that will never bring them to their journey's end. So you can manage your way through your children the same way you manage your spiritual portfolio. Careful, controlled, reasonable, but never quite surrendering, never quite receiving them, your children, as they actually are. You're only receiving them as you need them to be. What you actually pass down to your kids, and one of the reasons why we're going through the interior life using one of the greatest Christian mystics of the last 2,000 years, is because what gets passed down to your kids is what you actually believe. If you stop at Mansion 3, your children inherit a faith that's ordered enough to hold their lives together. But it's not deep enough for you to hold theirs, or maybe even theirs to hold anyone else's. So the question that Mansion 3 leaves us isn't just spiritual, it's generational. What have you mastered that you need to hold with an open hand? My name is Jacob Pannell, and this is Faithful Fatherhood. Thank you for listening. If this resonated with you, please subscribe, like, or share this video with someone who needs it.